Italy by Antonio Elefano. We had been dating 11 months and 14 days when you asked the question, "Why don't you tell me you love me more?" To my mind, the inquiry had two potential meanings. One, why don't I say I love you more? As in, why don't I favorably compare my present love to the love I felt in the past? And two, why don't I say I love you more? As in, why do I not employ the phrase I love you with more frequency? The latter seemed more likely, though I considered the former the more interesting possibility. As I parsed the semantics, you threw up your hands and directed me to go fuck myself. I declined. After 22 minutes of convincing you to unlock your bedroom door, I explained that I'd already told you I loved you approximately 6 months before. "I remember," you said. "But don't you find it odd you've never said it again?" Did you not believe me the first time? I have never been a person to say things for the sake of saying them. The son of an engineer and a linguist, I value precision and economy. To those who would say love is not the realm of such virtues, I would point to over a dozen relationships I've seen derailed by failures in communication. Not just lack of communication, but lazily constructed, reckless verbiage. Choose your words, especially to those you hold dear. A month later, I asked you to marry me, to which you said yes, to the minor dismay of your friends. A year after that, we were married in a greenhouse in Cape Cod. Small ceremony, friends and family, writing our own vows. You called me the most reliable man you had ever known. Dependable, honest, remarkably forthright. I said what I meant, never exaggerated, and it was that quality, that directness, for which others would take me to task, that you found so terrifically, terribly romantic. It seemed for just a moment you were addressing the crowd more than me, as if to say, "Here it is. Here are my reasons." I took no offense. I wondered at myself. My vows consisted of nothing more than a series of observations. Our third date, a hole-in-the-wall steakhouse you'd discovered on a shopping outing with your sister. You were wearing a burnt orange sweater over a white-colored shirt. You ran late that evening from an afternoon jog and didn't have time to straighten your hair. Thick, dark strands hung in loose waves around your flush from the cold face. You spoke excitedly about your newest project at work. There was a rhythm to your voice, an acceleration of words leading to a pause, a breathy rest, and then a more deliberate predicate bringing your point to cadence. Your shoulders slumped inward. You used your outstretched hands for emphasis. Fingers splayed like an insect's antenna. When you told a bad joke or sensed your story was getting dull, you averted eye contact. When you laughed, your neck craned upward, your shoulders relaxed, and your top lip disappeared into your smile. 2 hours into our dinner, you excused yourself to the ladies' room, leaving the entire room in a gray haze. I could only focus on you, your syncopated step, your forward lean, the way your legs seemed to disappear amidst the tables as you glided across the room. You caught me looking at you and were embarrassed, apologizing again with your eyes until a waitress directed you. You returned, smiling bashfully. You laughed, though nothing had been said. You told a disturbingly detailed account about catching your grandmother making love to a handyman, then insisted on paying the check in consideration for my listening. You thought you were so boring, so unworthy of attention, when in reality you were just painfully self-conscious and easily distracted. My mother had always told me marriage was the covenant of witnessing another's life. I could observe you forever. After the wedding, we moved to New York, where I'd been offered an assistant professorship at Columbia. Through a friend of a friend, you secured a position as event coordinator at the New York Public Library. We moved into an apartment on the Upper East Side, walking distance from the park. Together we took jogs in the morning, you deliberately slowing your pace, I deliberately quickening mine so that we could begin and end together. Our life was a study in reason and compromise. We developed routines. One movie a week, normally at one of the independent theaters in town. Eating out twice a week, one casual spot, the other whatever was in vogue according to New York Magazine or the Times. Theater once a month, classics for you, contemporary for me. Dinner parties twice a month with divided cooking responsibility. You, a specialist in Asian and Latin cuisines, I more inclined to American comfort food. When either of our parents visited, we offered our bed and refused to let them pay for anything. We went on tours, led them through museum exhibits, and both pretended to enjoy the opera. 3 years into our marriage, we tried conceiving a child. 3 months into our attempts, you became pregnant. A month after that, miscarriage. Through numerous doctor's visits and countless tests, you were very brave, and I admired your fortitude. We tried to conceive again 6 months later, and 2 months after that, you were pregnant again. Toward the end of your first trimester, another miscarriage. This time you took it harder. We had been confident. We had told our parents, despite the advice of friends, to wait until trimester 2. We had chosen names. A few months later, we talked about adoption, but ideas never solidified into plans. Eventually, we came to accept that our life together, our future, would be isolated to the two of us. Finally, dismissing all visions of parenthood, we came to realize the myriad beauties of accountability to only ourselves. In the years that followed, I received a tenured professorship at Columbia. You were promoted to head of event planning at the library. We moved out of our one room on the Upper East Side and bought a more spacious 2-bedroom in Park Slope, converting the second bedroom into an office/guest room. We hosted a well-attended housewarming where we served a Middle Eastern buffet and spicy rum punch. We increased the frequency of our theater going to twice a month and continued the tradition of alternating holidays to my family and yours, with the occasional Thanksgiving hosted by us. Compared to most couples married for a similar duration, our marriage had few conflicts. No indiscretions, no separations, arguments certainly, some quite heated. But most small, trifling in the grand scheme, differences in personality rather than loaded betrayals. My aversion to travel, for example, stemming from my fear of airplanes, which I readily conceded as irrational given the statistical data. You, by contrast, love to travel. In the spirit of conciliation, I didn't make a fuss when you took your annual trip with your mother. Ireland, Sweden, Thailand, Malaysia. Even though I felt disoriented without you, even for so short a time, I did not complain, and neither did you. After your mother passed, however, at the age of 77, you still wanted to see the world, and I still had the fear that a metal tube self-propelled into the sky would spell my certain doom. Nevertheless, for our 23rd anniversary, I booked 2 flights to Rome. For the first time in a long time, you seemed surprised and kissed me in a way you hadn't in years, a way I had forgotten to miss. "Thank you," you kept saying. "You're quite welcome," I replied. By the grace of modern pharmaceuticals, the only thing I remember about the flight to Italy was sitting next to a window, fastening my seatbelt, and holding your hand. I was unconscious by the time we left the runway. The day we arrived, we napped in our hotel for 3 hours. We woke up hungry and eager to explore. After a brief stroll through the surrounding blocks, we found the pizzeria suggested by our porter, where we shared rigatoni with tomatoes and pancetta, wafer-thin anchovy pizzas, and a chocolate cake made with olive oil. We were serenaded by a local chanteur named Fabrizio, dressed in blue jeans and a beige embroidered vest. We delighted in the novelty until we didn't, around quando. but then, aided by the third carafe of table wine, looped around again to good spirits. We told him we were celebrating our anniversary, and he kissed your hand and patted me on the back and wished us another 23 years. Afterward, we took a walk under the sycamore trees lining the Tiber River, held hands, and kissed when the moon struck us. We got lost walking back to the hotel, but found our way just before midnight. We didn't sleep until dawn. Running my fingers through your hair, now straight and long, and back to your natural color, I remembered past styles, the sensible pixie of 10 years ago, the semi-rebellious bleach blonde blue-streaked phase, the ill-advised perm of 7th grade, and finally the childhood bob of the girl in the blue dress, who now at last was more than just a silly fantasy, but a love, a true love, with flesh and struggle and history. Hovering just above your sleeping eyes and semi-parted lips, I watched you drift into a peaceful slumber. The next morning, we walked to the Pantheon. We put our fingers in drainage divots and marveled at the tiny tomb of Raphael. We threw coins into Trevi Fountain, 1 coin each, guaranteeing a return trip, and walked the upstairs circumference of the Colosseum, where we contemplated ancient battles of man and beast. Exiting toward the Forum, we recalled our own personal battles, silly and long ago, a fight about where to invest our savings, which you won, a quarrel over which car to purchase, which I won. In the late afternoon, we took a drive to the hills of Tivoli and the ground fountains of Tivoli Gardens. When we get back to the city, you said, I want to grow a garden like this. You killed a cactus in college. Now you want an olive tree on our fire escape? You know what your problem is? No faith, no imagination. A cactus, a plant that thrives on inattention. I hate your examples. You always pick the most ridiculous one and you repeat it. There was also the hydroponic herb tank. Now you're just being mean. The next day we went to St. Peter's Basilica, where you were mortified by the wax and bronze-covered popes. You made me promise to cremate you when your time came. I agreed quickly, if only because death had always frightened me, though over the years the thought of my demise was now overshadowed by the fear of yours. Outside of St. Peter's, we snacked on fried rice balls filled with mozzarella, tomato, and peas before driving north to Assisi and the Basilica of St. Francis. So let me get this straight, you said. This guy lectured in the nude for attention, preached to pigeons, and prayed for the stigmata, and you canonized him? You still had the habit of talking to me as if I were the personification of the Catholic Church. Well, anything in that tone sounds ridiculous. If we had kids, they would have been agnostic. It was the first time in years either of us had mentioned the specter of our lost children. I gave you all the reasons why spirituality, even if not organized religion, was important to a child and important to me. You nodded and suggested we table the hypothetical, which we did. I got seasick the next morning on the way to Capri. I closed my eyes and lowered my head. You pressed me against you and asked a noisy band of teenagers to pipe down. I felt better once we reached shore, but you got me a glass of water and insisted we sit before taking the shuttle to Anacapri. The drive up the mountain was beautiful and hectic, sharp zigzags revealing countless variations of breathtaking land and sea. We each took a chairlift to the highest point, on wooden seats that looked like something from an ancient primary school. With nothing to hold us but a rusty, retractable bar, we rose upward along the grassy cliff. The Mediterranean, bluer than blue, the pastel houses, heterogeneously lovely. Once at our destination, it was easy to fool ourselves into believing we were, in fact, at the top of the world. This is my new favorite place, you said. It is mine as well.